Welcome back to another episode of Growth Marketers Podcast. I'm Samuel Timothy.
And I'm Taylor Rowe. Is SEO still relevant? That's the question that we dove into today. We hear it all the time from customers and from prospects or interested companies that want to work from us, listeners to the podcast. Is SEO right for my business? Do keywords still matter? Is SEO a viable solution? And so the answer is it depends. It depends on your business model. So we broke down our top 5 considerations when it comes to investing into SEO, and some pretty cool and interesting statistics that I think will be beneficial to you as listeners. So please give us a like, rate the podcast, subscribe wherever you're listening, and of course share the podcast with a friend or a colleague. Let's dive right into the episode.
So Taylor, I know we talk a lot every day in terms of customers coming to us asking about different sort of marketing tactics and strategies to implement. Commonly asked, question is SEO still a viable medium or strategy for them to implement to drive customer acquisition efforts? And I think it's a loaded question, right? There's a lot of nuances that goes into saying whether or not SEO is the right strategy for them. So we want to take the opportunity today to kind of dispel some confusion people have about SEO, and then also answer some things that they need to consider as part of an SEO strategy before they engage in one. So you want to elaborate a little bit about some of the concerns that we hear from people?
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, all the time. Really for the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've heard or starting to hear these ideas. People come out and say SEO is dead or SEO doesn't work anymore. And the reality is it's constantly evolving, right? When Google started out, there was I think roughly 10,000 searches a day on Google. Now there's about 5.6 billion searches every day, right? So there's so much content out there. There's so many people searching that things have just changed, right? And Google has become more advanced. Obviously, we're looking at things like artificial intelligence, and the algorithm is kind of learning and consistently improving every single day. So it used to be that you could almost kind of cheat the system, and SEO is just about adding keywords to your website and making sure your title tags were set up properly, and basically you would show up because if you were in a niche of 50 competitors, you were probably the only ones that were creating content, and so it was pretty simple and pretty easy to show up. And now you're competing against so many different websites and so many different pieces of content. So I guess first we want to look at, okay, is SEO still relevant? Well, it depends. Yeah, it is relevant, absolutely. Again, there's 5.6 billion searches a day. So if your goal as a marketer is to get in front of your audience, there's really no better place to do that than Google, because people actively use it so often, right? There's about 92% of the market, search engine market, is controlled by Google. So Google is where it's at, right? When we talk about SEO, we talk about search engines, it's synonymous with Google. But what we need to understand is SEO the right strategy for you? And so that's what we want to walk through today, is some considerations that you need to make when developing an SEO strategy. And determine whether or not it's a relevant strategic move for your organization at this time. So a couple of other stats. Again, when we're talking about SEO, we're talking about search engine optimization. Again, it's the process of improving your website, optimizing your website and your content so that you have a better chance of showing up in the search results. So your customer goes to Google, they ask a question, they search for your product or service. How do we get them to our website? And we talk about Google again because they hold 92% of the search engine market. The nearest competitor, which is Bing, if we exclude YouTube, if we're just talking about traditional search engines, Bing only holds about 2.5% of that market share. So it's really not even close at this point in terms of the search engines that you should try to optimize for. Everybody is, the holy grail is Google. A couple other statistics to look at is 92% of all search queries are actually long-tailed keywords. So what that tells us is, 92% again is a big percentage. Almost all of the search terms are long-tailed, meaning they are specific search terms. They're questions. People are trying to find very specific solutions. It also means that as users and people that are searching, we're becoming more sophisticated, right? Because we're starting to understand as a population, if you think about especially younger generations that are growing up accustomed to using Google, are understanding how to search in order to find what we want to find on Google, right? So, you look at a long tail keyword, you want to make sure that you kind of understand the intent behind that and how that applies to your business, which we'll get into here in a second. And one more statistic I want to share is that actually 50%, more than 50% of Google searches end without a click. So that's the other thing to think about. Again, you look at that in practice, somebody searching a long-tailed specific search term, meaning they're looking for a very specific answer, and over half of them don't ever click on anyone's website. So what does that tell you? How do you measure that as a marketer? If we're ranking number 1, we're ranking number 5, but no one's clicking on it, right? We can see the search volume and we can see the impressions and analytics and Search Console, but we can't see we don't see any traffic. Well, again, research-related searches, different types of search results, rich snippets, featured snippets. Ultimately, a lot of times people are not going to the website. They're finding the answer on Google without actually clicking on the website. And it goes back to what Google is trying to do, right? Google's trying to control the traffic, and Google's trying to provide them the best possible user experience. So that's why Google autofills your search when you start to type. That's why they show you, people also search in terms of the recommended searches. So they show you those rich snippets and highlight the actual answer to the question that you were asking. So, the question is SEO so relevant? Well, yeah, maybe the metrics are a little bit different. We're not talking about, the traffic the same way that we would, or maybe traffic is going down. Maybe the search terms that we're trying to optimize for are changing and evolving. But there's more searches today than ever in Google, which means there's more opportunities now than ever to get in front of your audience in what we would call an active buyer intent related channel. So you have to just understand the variables and understand the game that we're playing, and then we can start to get into how we can optimize and how we can modify this for our company and our organization.
Yeah, it's funny that some of the things that you mentioned, I was just smiling in my mind because I was at a conference this past week. I probably did maybe more than 200 searches, and not just finding places to eat, finding kind of the safe place to hang out, all those things. But I'm also sitting in sessions when they're talking about the speaker that's coming up. I was looking up their name and I was looking up their company, which I did not even have to click to go find their website. I would just look at their description of the website, or I search for that person's name, and then I might just see his name and his title and what company he worked for, because there were some panels where multiple people that I didn't know. I'm not a big sports guy, so there was a couple of sports athletes that came that I didn't know them about, and you can see who they are and how many championships they won, all of those things that you were talking about. So if it's 5.6 billion searches are happening, 50% of them never gets clicked. That's a significant number still, right? We're talking probably about 2.3 billion searches that still end in a visit to some sort of a website. So it's not a small number that we're talking in terms of visitors that can come from a search.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's become a verb, right? It's you're trying to figure something out. Well, did you Google it? But you should Google it. Try to Google it, right? It's not even you should search for that. Go to a search engine and search for it. You should Google it. So. For now, right? Obviously, things change, but Google is absolutely the dominant player in the space. And again, things are evolving, and as things evolve, we as consumers evolve. So even though I know our audience is primarily B2B, and the clients that we work with are B2B, we're still people at the end of the day. We're consumers, and our habits don't change in terms of how we make purchases and how we find information, which is really the question that we want to answer. So. The first consideration we want to take, right, if we're answering this question, is SEO so relevant? Is it relevant for me, or is it a viable option for me? First, I would say understand your market maturity, right? So if we look at all of this data and we look at the statistics that are in front of us, just again think logically about Google. Well, what is Google? People go to Google to do what? They go to Google to find answers to questions that they have, right? They go to Google to find solutions. So when I say understand your market maturity, are people aware of either the problem that they're trying to solve or a solution like yours that exists, right? And I'll just use ourselves as an example, right? We are a digital marketing agency. We are an inbound marketing agency. You could say SEO agency, whatever, however you wanted to say it. Well, this market has become, more and more mature over the years. So there's enough people that know what that terminology is to actually search for it, right? They're searching for digital marketing agency. If you're in a less mature market, meaning you're creating a new product category, you're solving a problem that maybe people didn't know that exists, or they know there's a problem, but they don't necessarily know that solution exists because maybe you're inventing something in some sort of way, right? You're launching a new software that solves a problem that's a huge problem, but nobody knows that terminology for that software because they've never heard of it before, right? So understanding your market maturity is the first thing that you need to understand because that's going to start helping you understand the type of content that you need to create. And if you want to just look at it and break it up into top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, or just top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel is probably the easiest way to understand your market maturity. Is like, are people asking long tail questions like we just talked about? They're asking questions about how to improve efficiencies of their business or cut costs or whatever your software, your tool, your product helps them do. They might be researching around that, or are there other ancillary areas within the business that you can provide value, right? So, are you, let's say, for us, like we help manufacturing companies acquire more customers, right? So we do that through digital marketing, through inbound marketing. If those manufacturing companies never heard of digital marketing, can we create content around questions that we know the leadership of those manufacturing companies are going to be asking Google? So that's one way. Again, it's, the idea is, can we get in front of our audience on Google? But we have to understand what our audience knows and understands about our business, and are they actively searching for it? Is there existing demand for what we have to offer?
Yeah, and I think when you talk about the market maturity, one of the things to also keep in mind is the addressable market sizable enough too. So you could be in an established market, but then you have a very niche audience, and that means the demand may be still low, but it still could be a very effective channel to attract those people. You may not see like running shoes is going to have a lot more search volume than somebody who does precision die cutting, because there's not a lot of people that are actually looking for precision die cutting, but that does not mean there isn't people looking for precision die cutting, company in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a perfect segue into the next point that I wanted to make, and next consideration, which is know and understand your metrics, right? Get to know your metrics, and probably the three most important metrics when it comes to search. If we're just, again, starting to research around the viability of this type of a program, SEO, look at search volume, search intent, and then basically level of competition or difficulty. So if you look at those three things and find a balance between them, search volume meaning how many people on average are searching each month for that particular keyword or search term. And you have to build up a list, a pool of search terms, right? So it could be 10, could be 100, could be 1,000 different ways people are searching for your product or service or asking questions around how to improve their business or something similar to what you have to offer, and then contrast that and compare that to the actual intent of the search, which is kind of what we were talking about. Is, are they just simply asking questions, or are they all the way down to the bottom of the funnel, meaning they know exactly what they're looking for and they're really looking for a solution or a vendor to help them? And then difficulty or level of competition is probably that final piece that you need to understand when building your strategy. Is like, is it even possible for us, right? You mentioned, the idea of running shoes or something like that. It's like, if you and I started a new shoe brand and we were trying to sell, shoes online, maybe, SEO wouldn't be the first strategy, the first channel that we look to implement. It's not that there's not a ton of search volume, and it's not that there's not a ton of search intent. It's that the level of competition is so insane that it's very difficult to differentiate yourself in that market through SEO in particular, because you have to look at how that audience makes purchases. There's probably other options that are better for you, Instagram ads, Facebook ads, Google shopping ads, right? If people are searching for a particular type of shoe, if you could show up in the product listing, they can actually see the shoe as a very, visual product, right? So would I say if you started writing blogs about, the top, 10 running shoes for marathon runners, like, yeah, that could be a strategy. But again, you're competing with all the running websites, all the fitness websites, all the shoe manufacturers like Nike and Adidas and Puma, and it's seemingly nearly impossible to show up for that in any sort of a timetable that would produce an ROI, where you might want to look at other channels. So if you find a balance between search volume, search intent, and search difficulty, is probably the first place I would start in terms of understanding your metrics once you again understand your maturity of your market.
Yeah, and I think one thing I would add in terms of competitors too, sometimes people confuse competitors with a company that's directly compete with them on the product or service. But oftentimes in the B2B space, you might see there are business directories, there is a publication websites, there are association websites, any sort of those sort of sites that actually are more informational and educational in nature tend to rank fairly high. And you may perceive them not as a direct competitor or a threat to your business, but in fact, they are taking up the spots on Google's results, which means your chance of getting up on that page one or at least on the top listings become a little bit difficult. So keep in mind that competition doesn't always mean they take away business from you. They just take away a spot that you can actually have on Google results.
Yeah. And this is not a new concept, but it is something we hear all the time, right? They're not a competitor to us because they don't manufacture, they're just a distributor, or we do this or we do that, right? But anybody that searches online, for anybody that shows up online rather, for those searches that the traffic you're trying to get and takes traffic away from us, is a competitor, right? So like I said before, if you identify 100 keywords, you type those in, anybody that shows up on the first 5 pages for any of those 100 keywords is a competitor to you. Just like, if you own a movie theater and locally, a bowling alley is a competitor, right? It's because it's an alternative that, someone can do on their Friday night or Saturday night. They're taking away that audience, right? There's only a certain number of people that want to, do something, and there's alternatives to that. They don't show any movies at the bowling alley, and you can't bowl at the movie theater. But you only have so much time. So that's technically a competitor, just in the same way that somebody's searching for your product or service and they're finding a directory, they're finding an article, if Wikipedia shows up, then that's a competition, because we're talking about, can you outrank them? Can you beat them in the search results? That's your competition.
Yeah, most certainly. So what's our third consideration to keep in mind when we're thinking about SEO as a strategy?
Sure. So if you start, kind of looking at this logically again, you start to understand your market maturity, and you define, okay, yes, people understand that there's a problem. They understand of a solution. There's enough search volume and enough intent that I believe I can get, a certain percentage of the traffic based on the level of competition. Well, then you start to have to understand the actual buyer's journey, right? So I talked about that top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. This is, again, with any type of content that you're creating, we always talk about understanding intent. And the way that we break it down is we look at it as create versus capture, right? Creating awareness, generating demand versus capturing existing demand. So only those bottom of the funnel search terms, branded searches included, and then basically people searching for a particular product or service are bottom of the funnel, right? And that's where you're going to get, when you talk about the funnel and you talk about attribution, like all the credit is going to go to those bottom of the funnel search terms, right? But how do we create awareness? How do we get in front of the audience earlier on in the process? Well, you have to create content around those research-related searches, or you have to create educational content that's going to provide value to them earlier on in the process. And this can be done through a number of different channels. Search is not the only one, but you certainly want to start to create content around those topics and put them on your website to try to show up for search, because like we talked about, 92% of search queries are long tail keywords. That means that people are, again, researching, they're asking questions. There were some other statistics I read about how many people are actually searching in terms of a question form, which was well over 50%, and more than 50% of those searches end without a click, which again, I can infer from that people are asking questions that are straightforward enough that Google is highlighting the answer and they never actually have to go and click on a search result. So a ton of that volume, if we talk about those 5.6 billion searches a month, a ton of that is going to be research related. So there's a huge opportunity at the top of the funnel, but we have to understand our buyer's journey and align the content with the intent of the user and how they make decisions and how they start to understand that they might be looking for a solution like yours.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to keep in mind, especially when you're thinking about the buyer's journey, the knowing what the buyer's sales, the buying journey, like not every search that they made, like you said, is going to turn into a click, and the clicks that come to your website or the visitor doesn't necessarily mean they were ready in that purchase journey. They're ready to make that purchase commitment. So they're doing a whole lot of research. So oftentimes you need to have hundreds, if not thousands of visitors to come to your website to get a small percentage of people to actually proactively reach out. So you need to think about it from that perspective as well. Sometimes organic traffic is very hard to come by, and it takes a lot of visitors before you actually see that traffic turning into some sort of a realized money or value to the company. So the understanding the metrics, like we talked about, the search volume and the intent, all that plays a big part from a buyer's journey alignment as well.
You read my mind, Sam, because my next point is to manage internal expectations. So you hit the nail on the head of there's so many variables that you have to think about in terms of that traffic. Well, if we have more top of the funnel research related content that's starting to rank and index, our traffic is going to go up, conversion rates are going to go down, right? Because those people are not necessarily ready to convert or to see a demo or to schedule an appointment or request a quote because they're just researching, right? We also have to look at, again, we talked about the level of competition. We talked about the sheer volume of competitors and searches that are happening every day online. We talked about the number of people that never even click to your website. And it's becoming more and more difficult to rank on Google. So we understand that. So we have to understand our expectations and manage them internally. It's like some of these things are going to take longer than others. It is a long-term strategy, a long-term play. It's potentially a never-ending play. A lot of people ask, how long is this going to take? How long do I invest? And then when can I stop, right? When can I coast? Which is a bit like, we talk a lot of fitness, fitness comparisons here or examples, but it'd be like saying, well, once I get in shape, once I, get jacked, or once I get to the point where I can run a marathon, then I just have that, right? Then I can just, I can wait a year and I can go run another marathon. And that's just not the case, right? It's, you get to that point and it's continuous improvement, you're never satisfied. And that's kind of how SEO works. But of course you want to reach that, tipping point where you become profitable. And it's an uphill battle. It's a long, strategy, and it's a moving target, right? Because Google is consistently changing. Your competitors are doing the same thing that we're talking about. So it's not for the faint of heart in terms of, hey, we want to dip our toes in the water or test this strategy out, or we'll instead of we look at our competitors and they're creating 10 pieces of content a month, or they have a million backlinks. So we'll just we'll create one piece of content a quarter and we'll, get one backlink and we'll just see, right? It's not how the game is played. You have to go all in. You have to look at the long term. And for the companies that win, the ROI is, significantly greater than pretty much any other channel because effectively the traffic is free. It just takes a lot of manpower to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fitness analogy is across the board is the perfect one for anything to do with content marketing and SEO, because I think, like you said, you can't take your foot off the pedal after you got in shape, right? Then you still need to continue to work out regularly, eat right, and exercise, do whatever, right? Like following that rigid regimen. The same thing is true just trying to get fit, right? Like that's even much more. You need a lot of patience, and it takes a lot longer to get in shape as well. So.
Well, right, yeah. The more out of shape you are, is probably the harder it is to do. And then once you get there, the more important it is to stay there, right? And I think that's very, very poignant when it comes to comparing, SEO and something like that.
Yeah, you never ranked for anything. Your website has no domain authority. You had written no content whatsoever in the past. Your website had all kinds of technical issues. Now you're just scratching the surface, improving the technical things and getting your website to actually start to index first. Then you have to create content and you need to produce it at a higher level. and then you need the patience to wait and
you're
see
actually,
when.
yeah, and you're competing against other people, and that's
That's been there.
that's probably the biggest difference between when you talk about a fitness journey is like you're kind of just competing against yourself. The difference would be like if you're competing against yourself, and then all of a sudden
Michael Phelps.
you get you get thrown into an NFL game, right?
Yeah.
It's like that's Google is. I mean, it's the internet is everyone is competing. Everyone, doesn't matter how much money you have, how big and strong you are. I mean, it is literally you're competing against everybody in the world that is creating content. So, manage those expectations, but do that based on research, right? So do your research and have a plan. I think maybe we're not trying to scare anybody off, but we want to set realistic expectations in terms of this type of a strategy.
Yeah, you can be scared and run away from it because it is an effective strategy. There's no doubt, but you just have to have the right expectation going into it.
Yeah. So the final consideration we want to discuss is, we talked about all this, and it's kind of funny, right? It's people get so caught in the weeds of the statistics, the data. We have so much data at our fingertips, and the only reason I brought up some of these stats is just to illustrate again the volume or the opportunity that's happening on search engines on Google. And so be data driven, right, is kind of our point, but be logical. Think logically. If you look at Google again, I mean, there's hundreds of variables that come into play when determining your ranking, and every SEO expert has different theories and philosophies on domain authority and your backlink profile, and whether or not what the keyword density needs to look like, and what a good internal linking strategy and site architecture. Do we need long form content, short content, huge websites and thousands of pages, or small websites with deep 10,000 word pages but only 15 pages? Everybody has different opinions on what works and what doesn't work, and the reality is it changes every day. Platforms, what platform ranks the best, what CMS ranks for the best, all these kind of things. So yes, understand those metrics in general, but think logically. Again, look at what you see on Google. Search results, what we call the SERP, a search engine results page. There's so many variations of the way Google is showing the results based on the intent of the search. Look at your own consumer behavior. How do you search? How do you Google? What content do you like to consume? Ask yourself, if I was my customer, what would be the best way to illustrate this topic, right? So if I'm asking a research related question of how to do this, how to do that, what's the best process for this? How would you, if it was perfect, how would you articulate that? Would it be a video? Would it be an infographic? Would it be a blog post? Would it be a long form piece of content that has chapters of all the different steps that need to be taken? Again, it's probably a combination of the two. Like, would you rather have a very large comprehensive piece of content that's also broken down into smaller bits and pieces that has some sort of a glossary or an index that you could click and it takes you directly to that question or that topic that you're trying to answer, right? So be organized. Be direct and poignant with your answers to the questions that people are searching, and put yourself in the customer's shoes and try to make your website the best inbound buying experience, the best answer to the question, because that's really what Google's trying to do. Is that Google's trying to show the user the most relevant result to whatever they were searching and show them the best user experience. So there's no tricks, there's no hacks, there's no shortcuts when it comes to cheating the system. It's if we want to be the most relevant result to whatever that search term is, we have to become the most relevant result, and we have to prove to Google that we are deserving of that number one spot. So ask yourself, if you don't know anything about SEO, just ask yourself what that looks like in terms of a website. And I think if you start doing that for all the pieces of content you create, you're going to see success, and the small details are going to make more of a big difference at that point than they would if you just mailed it in on the content itself and then did everything you can on the optimization. It's not going to work. Start with the best answer, the best content, the best format of that content. And if that means you can only create a couple of pieces of content a week or a month, that's fine. It's quality over quantity in this scenario.
Yeah, one thing I would say from data side is, you're not completely working in the dark. You have third-party tools and technology that you can use to measure the leading indicators that proves whether or not your efforts are producing the right type of outcome you're looking for, maybe in the form of just keyword position, change history, and the progress of all those keywords, and overall ranking, and then the lag measure being the traffic growth as well as the conversions that come out of it. So you're not just saying, hey, create content and then just hope that everything just works out to your benefit, but overall you could still be monitoring and measuring the progress over time and make sure that your efforts are producing positive ROI.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode. Please, if you have any questions, send them in. Don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the podcast, share with a friend or a colleague, and tune in next week for next episode.
Growth Marketers is brought to you by One IMS, helping you reach new heights through integrated marketing. One world, one web, one IMS.